Welcome. It's great to see all of you here today, and we have more people coming in at the sign-in table. But I'm going to go ahead and get started so we can get to the good stuff. My name is Jill Hopkins, and I serve as the chair of the Women in Propane Business Council for the MPGA. Just over 2 short years ago, the MPGA approved the formation of the Women in Propane Business Council. One of the first things we did was ask our members, as well as the leaders in the industry, what they wanted. The consistent and resounding answer was mentoring. The identification of this need has led us to our meeting here today with Dr. Liz Selzer, President and CEO of the Mentor Leadership Group. In Dr. Selzer's words, mentoring uses the power of relationship to maximize growth on a personal and organizational level. Who doesn't need that? In my words, it is clear that better mentors plus better mentees equals a better industry. Dr. Selzer is going to share with us how and why. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Liz Selzer.
Can I help? Oh, you guys, I know what time it is on a Friday, and I love that you're here because I don't know if I would have that much dedication, but hopefully this will be a good session. Hopefully I'll try to keep you awake. I won't yell too loud, but I'll try to keep things interesting. The handout that you have will really have all the pertinent information kind of that I go through, and we'll have some time for question and answer at the end. So, but if something comes up in the middle and you just want to ask a question, just please do so. It won't mess me up or anything like that. You know, mentoring is a huge waste of time. At least that's what I thought. As I was sitting in the back of a classroom trying to get my master's degree, and I was being told that I had to find not only one mentor, but 2. Now this seemed like a bunch of touchy-feely stuff that I didn't have time for. I mean, I was a young mom, I had toddlers, I had a husband who traveled all the time. Where am I going to find time to do this stuff? I absolutely did not see the benefit. But the problem was that I couldn't graduate unless I found those 2 mentors. So, begrudgingly, I found them. Now, fast forward to the time I graduated. By that time, I was such a fan of mentoring. I saw how it really built up my learning. I learned stuff that I never would have learned out of the textbooks I was studying. And so I was even writing articles on the benefits of mentoring. And then fast forward even farther, my PhD work was actually in looking at mentoring as a form of powerful learning for people. And so clearly at this point, I am a fan. Now I don't know what you all think of it. And so I just want you to, just by a show of hands, how many of you are here, you kind of think maybe it's an interesting idea, you sort of want to learn a little bit about? Some people? Okay. That's fine. It doesn't hurt my feelings. Trust me. You heard how much I didn't want to do it. So, okay, how many people are like, yeah, you know what? I think it sounds like it's pretty good. Want to learn more? How many is in that? Okay, how many are just, oh, I love mentoring? How many are like that? You don't really have to make that noise, but okay. So that gives me a good idea of what we've got going on here. I want you to think about the last time you learned something from another person. How many can raise their hands and say that occurred? Okay, what did you learn?
I've learned how to do my job yesterday as my boss is a mentor.
Awesome. Somebody else, what else did they learn? Oh, see, raise your hands again. Come on, you guys, it's not that late in the day.
Learn not to raise my hand.
Learn not. That's great. What'd you learn?
That I can bounce questions off of someone with more experience, maybe you have a dilemma,
Yeah, to get more information. And that's really what happens. It's that interchange of ideas. That's what makes mentoring so powerful, because you're not just reading a book that doesn't respond to you. You're actually talking with someone who does respond to you and answers your questions and doesn't judge you. They just help you out. Mentoring is incredibly powerful, and especially in times of economic downturn, it's critical because it helps you really utilize your human resources in a much different way. And it's not difficult. We're going to go through how very easy it is. It just takes intentionality. And so I'm hoping by the end of this that you will be thinking about where you might want to become a mentee, people you might want to learn from, where you might be able to become a mentor, how you might be able to apply this to your organizations to really supercharge the people working there. I mean, mentoring helps you identify all kinds of skills and talents that you may not even know you have in your organization right now. So, without further ado, I want to just thinking about mentoring and the different ways that it takes effect. We talked about learning a skill. How many, and I won't call on you, how many of you have learned an attitude from somebody? Not just a skill, an attitude. Is there anyone that has raised their hand that is willing to describe what happened there? Yeah.
I have a coworker, and she has a really positive attitude. It doesn't matter how many really nasty people call her on the phone and are yelling at her. She always has a really positive attitude, and it helps her to get through the day. And I learned from her that positive is a lot better than dry things.
It's contagious. That's what I love about it. Okay, you get my book, since you actually were willing to share. The difficult question. All right. So looking at the value of mentoring, let's look at, okay, what do you get if you're a mentor? Well, first of all, it reinforces your accomplishments. So when you're sitting there talking with someone else about how to do something, you're actually verbalizing that. And it reinforces it in your own life. You sit there and go, wow, I forgot I learned that. Or, gee, that was an accomplishment. That wasn't so bad. Next, it expands a mentor's sphere of influence. Just by virtue of mentoring someone else, you now have had a great influence on that person. And by the way, they will tell other people about your influence. I talk to people about my mentors all the time and the great things that they've done for me. And so they live on in this kind of legacy type way because I can't stop talking about the help that they gave me. It enhances communication skills and learning. I want to tell you just a quick story. When I was asked to go speak at NASA, and we were to train on mentoring and everything. So I get down there, and this guy is like, oh my gosh, you have no idea who's in that room. You have no idea who's in that room. And I'm like, okay, but you're freaking me out. Why are you doing this? And he's like, but it's all the big guys, the rocket scientists, the really big guys, they're in that room. And I'm like, okay. And so I walk in, and lo and behold, there is a very long table down the center of the room, and all of the rocket scientists, white hair, pulled back in a ponytail, they're all sitting around that table. And then around the edge are all these people that are young, and I guess that's the situation. We're going to have the older rocket scientists mentor the younger rocket scientists. And in fact, NASA did a study that found, with some really great statistics, that what makes their rocket scientists and their system analysts better at their job is the softer skills of mentoring. So anyway, I go in there and I think, I don't know who these people are, so I'm just going to talk to them like normal people. And we just went through the whole situation and what they needed to do. Afterwards, two of the men came up to me and they said, the older men, and they said, we have to admit, we were a little freaked out about this mentoring thing. Because they said, what were we supposed to do? Like sit there and have all our brain cells pop all over the young person? We just didn't know what to do. It seemed really difficult and challenging. But they said, after talking to you, we see it's very simple. It's about communication, and it's about sharing your learning. And they were very comfortable with the process. So that's what I hope you will leave with today. One of the takeaways is that this isn't difficult, and anyone can do it. It just takes intentionality. All right. It provides a way to reciprocate or give back. You know, a lot of times, and a lot of people maybe even in this room, you're at that stage in your life, you've been pretty successful, you've done a lot, and that's felt good so far. But you know, what are you leaving behind? You know, if you don't leave some of yourself in the people who are behind you, sorry, actually promoting leaving a legacy, it's right there too, then what do you have? You know, you've just left a hole and there's nothing there. But if you can take the time to think about how can I reciprocate? How can I finally give back? It's going to give you a different kind of joy. Okay, it increases your recognition. You know, when people hear about the good stuff you're doing and you're a mentor, it's like, oh, cool. And allows for you to do focused investment on another human being. Because I know a lot of times, especially if you're in management, there's a lot of people that want to learn from you. But if you can get into a more formalized or structured mentoring relationship, then you can really focus your investment, and it's really much more powerful that way because you're learning about that person, you're interacting on a regular basis, and it's a very powerful form of learning. And finally, it increases the personal satisfaction of just making a difference, you know? All right, so thinking about mentees, I want to tell you a story to illustrate the value for mentees. I'm trying to think how long ago, it was maybe 10 years ago or so, my family had moved a number of times, and it was Christmas time. And you know how Christmas time is. You're running all over the place, and you're doing things, and it's crazy, and it's busy, and you're cooking, and you're buying presents, and you're seeing relatives, and you're doing all these things, and you keep going, and then finally, it's the day after Christmas. And what does the mom get to do? Women in the room. What, the day after Christmas, might you get to do, like, one time in your life? What? Clean the mess. Clean the mess. I love it. Sleep in. Thank you so much. That's exactly right. Sleep in. And so I told my kids, I said, you know what, guys? I said, you guys have toys to play with. I mean, if you get hungry, I'm sure there's some Cheerios on the floor in the pantry. You won't starve. It'll be okay. I said, Mommy is not getting up before 11 o'clock. She's just not going to. So, you know, the kids understood it, I thought. And so, you know, I was sitting there, laying there, and I'm thinking, oh, I got to get up? No, I don't. You know, and I slide back into those pillows and that comforter, and I'm so comfortable and just enjoying the fact that I don't have to get up. I'm just laying there. Yes, Joe, my 6-year-old. Mom, he goes, I'm looking at the Christmas tree, and I'm noticing that there's dust under the Christmas tree. What? Dust under the Christmas tree? Honey, it's fine. Go back out there. Mommy will clean it up later, to your point. I'll clean it up later. No problem. So I'm back, and I said, do not bother Mommy. I don't want to see you again. Well, until after I wake up. So I'm laying there. Sorry. What? You know, being the kind mother I am, I scream at my poor child day after Christmas. And he's like, kind of jumps back, and he's like, but Mom, he goes, I'm looking at the dust under the Christmas tree. And I'm sitting there going, okay, what is disturbing this child enough about dust? He's never cared about dust in his life. And he goes, and Mom, when I'm looking at the dust, I'm noticing that there's some little white balls in the dust. Sitting there thinking, something is strange here. And something has made him risk my wrath now twice. And so I thought, you know what? I better go find out what's going on. So I put on my robe, slide into my slippers, go out to the Christmas tree. And you have to know, this Christmas tree kind of represented our family because we'd moved so many times, and these ornaments were from the kids when they were little, you know, family members that largely weren't around anymore. And so it was a very precious thing to me. So I walk in, and I see this tree, and I take a moment, I just think, oh, you know, how nice. And Joey's like going, And I'm like, okay. He goes, look at the dust. And I said, Joey, it's just dust. I mean, it is just dust bunnies kind of blowing around on the heating vent. And I'm like, it's okay, it's okay. And he goes, no, Mommy, come down here. And so I look at the dust. And I do notice what he's talking about. There are little white balls in that dust. And then I look at it, and there's like little sticks sticking out of the white balls. And you know how that really bad feeling starts in the back of your neck? And you know something is very, very, very wrong. And so I back up and I take another look at the Christmas tree. And what I realize is that spontaneously hatching are thousands and thousands of spiders all over my tree. And so I scream for my husband, and I go, and my older son, and my daughter. I say, get down here, And so Steve is in there, and he's got his hands in there. He's pulling off the ornaments, and he's got the spiders crawling down his back. And I've got the vacuum, and I'm kind of vacuuming his back, and then I'm vacuuming the ornaments, and I'm handing them to my older son, who's sort of picking the spider bodies off the ornament, and then he's handing them to my daughter, who's kind of doing that, and then, she's handing them to my youngest son, who is safely putting them in a pile in the corner. And so I tell you this story because I promise you, you will remember this when you're thinking about mentoring. The first thing that I learned from this story is that anybody's perspective should be respected, and everyone has something to teach you. I never thought that listening to my 6-year-old son would be very, very important to the fact that my house did not become infested with spiders. And so just think about that. A lot of times we might look at someone who's younger than us and think they don't have anything to offer, or that we can learn from them. Or we might look at somebody who's, he's too old, or he's too, stuck in his ways. I can't work with him. Or she's disrespectful, or he's entitled. But I tell you, if we can get that attitude that we can learn something from anyone, even in some cases how not to behave, but we can learn something from anyone. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, why mentoring is so important for a mentee is you need to have someone who can tell you when what you think is just harmless dust is actually a spider in your life. Do you have somebody that says the hard things to you, that makes you better, that helps you grow, because they care enough to tell you when you're not doing everything exactly perfectly? That's what you can learn. Think about what you can learn. When somebody has the strength to tell you, hey, you know what, you're coming across really rudely to this group of people. Or, hey, when you don't turn your stuff in on time, it really affects everybody else, and they're pretty irritated with you. Do you have somebody that can do that for you? If you can get your organizations doing that, do you know how much it would improve your work and the production that you have? Phenomenal. Get people in these mentoring relationships. Okay, let's look at the other things. It expands the mentee's sphere of influence. They, as they start getting, when you're being mentored, and I know that some of my mentors then have also introduced me to other mentors, they've highlighted my skills to people, and all of a sudden people start seeing you as, again, a valued employee or a valued person. It enhances communication and easy for me to say, decision-making skills. Again, when you can have that interaction with somebody and talk with them and can kind of go through your decision-making process, it helps you. It's a great sounding board for, like you were saying, it helps you sound things out and figure out what the better decision might be because you have this other perspective that you're getting. Next, it improves your time management and career development when you have somebody who is really helping you understand the ropes of how to move up in your career and move forward. It reduces burnout by helping individuals find an integrated work-life balance. That's the thing about mentoring, is it's not just about a skill, it's about the whole person. And when we talk about the 6 mentoring relationships, you'll see kind of how these all play out. Next, it helps mentees better manage work through ambiguity and constantly changing environments. How many of you guys feel like this world is just going so fast that you're like going crazy? Anybody? I mean, I just feel like every day stuff is changing. How many of you guys have an iPhone 3? How many have an iPhone 4? What about the 5? Who wants the 6? Okay. I'm just saying, you know, and that's just in a few years. Okay. Increases confidence and faster learning of organizational culture, skills, and attitudes. We had a situation in one of the organizations where I worked for that we needed a marketing girl. Not a marketing girl, excuse me, a marketing person. She ended up being a girl, okay. But so we had done a whole huge search to find this person and spent quite a bit of money on finding this person and, you know, got it down to 3 candidates and then we interviewed more and then got it down to this, finally, this one person. And she was very skilled. She was very good at what we had hired her to do. But when she got there, she had come from a publishing company. Our company was a little different. It was a nonprofit, and it was run by, there were a lot of young parents in the company. So what happened was the company she was coming to, people got to work at sometimes 6:30, 7 in the morning. I mean, and by 8 o'clock, you were having meetings, and your day was definitely on its way. Well, she'd come from a publishing company where they started about 10. So she would walk in at 10. And everyone started really getting irritated by that. They're like, gosh, she barely comes to work. She's so late. We're practically done with our day at 10, you know? And so this resentment starts building up. And of course, no one's mentoring her on this. Well, and I have to point fingers back at me because I certainly should have been better about helping her understand this organizational culture situation. The second thing was that this company that I belonged to had, they had kind of an open door policy. So any of the leadership of the company kept their doors open unless you were talking about something that was confidential. But for the most part, you kept your doors open. So people could come in and converse and all that. And I can't tell you that that was the smartest thing as far as work productivity, but that's just the culture. Well, she came in because, again, she came from this publishing house. She liked to stay in her office and shut the door because that's what they did. They would shut the door because they were editing or they were writing or they were doing all these things. So to her, shutting the door was very normal. But now think, all the people that were already irritated with the fact that she was showing up half a day late, now they're looking and go, God, we don't even know if she's here because the door's shut, you know? Is she really here? I don't think she's here. I think she's really not here yet. You know, and I mean, this poor girl, she lasted about 3 months. I mean, and think about the money that the company lost because of that. So, anyway, example of how important it is for a mentee to have a mentor. It promotes visibility. We're going to talk about sponsorship in the next little section. And increases the feeling of being valued. I have a company that I'm working for. It's an international school, and they have schools in 21 countries. And what they were finding was that their turnover was so high because, you know, they'd hire these young teachers, and they'd get out to this new country, that, so first of all, they're just starting to be a teacher, and then they're trying to learn a new culture, and it was just really, really difficult. And so they said, you know, we really need, the president talked to me, goes, you know, it's not just about the turnover, although it's hitting my bottom line, but it's also because I want them, when they're out in this strange country, to feel valued, to feel like we as a company care about them. Because we feel like if they think that, they'll be happier and they'll do a better job and everybody wins. And so that's what we did. And I'll tell you just a little aside, we had trouble because we didn't have enough senior people. So again, as you're thinking about your companies, even if you don't have enough senior people, you can do more of a reciprocal mentoring relationship. And that's what we had to do with these schools. And basically what they do is they take turns being the mentor and then being the mentee every other week. And I know you're going, well, wait, how does that work? Well, it works because anybody can give encouragement and accountability on goals. So you can mentor somebody even if you don't have a bunch of expertise to give. So, any questions on this so far? Guys are, you know, yeah. Oh, I think that's awesome.
Yeah, so how do you do that?
You know what, do you mind if I defer your question until we talk about the 6 mentoring relationships? Because I think that we will cover that there, because I agree with that. You can do that. You definitely can do that. And I will tell you, because I was asked to speak on the benefits and how it will improve your organization, I do a whole training session on how to do it. I talk about 5 skills that if you and your mentor, if you guys work on these, do these 5 skills, your mentoring relationship will go great, even if they don't know it. So,
Yeah, because most people are going to kind of, oh, you're not going to mentor me, I already know everything. Especially if they're right this morning.
okay, if I don't answer your question, will you ask it again in the Q&A? Sure. Okay. All right, any other questions? Yeah.
Mentoring people, how would some people receive it as not being mentored or being harassed?
It's how you do it. Okay, this is the thing. Okay, in a perfect world, we all love each other and respect each other and never say a harsh word and we don't harass people, okay? But that's what I'm saying. Simple mentoring skills that you can, that stem from a very deep place of respect for the other person should not come across as harassment, okay? If you really care about helping them be more effective, you know, so much of it's how you couch what you say to them, you know? If you tell them that they're hopeless and you just can't even see anything positive with them, but maybe if they listen to you, they might be better, that's probably not going to come off too well. But if you come up and say, hey, you know what? I've noticed that you do these 3 things really well, and I would love to just talk to you about that on, you know, maybe a regular basis. Could we get a cup of coffee maybe every other week? That comes off very differently. Doesn't sound so harassing as you're hopeless and we have to help you become a decent human being, you know? So, all right, any other questions? You may think of more. Organizations, again, your organizations, think about how you might be able to improve what's going on in your organizations through mentoring. First of all, we've seen it give the recruiting edge, and I actually work with ConocoPhillips, although it's not ConocoPhillips anymore, but I used to do trainings for them, and what they would do is they would go into the schools around them and find the best and the brightest, and they would bring them into their mentoring program. And so they would mentor them for their senior year of college. Well, now think about that. When it comes time for that student to look for a job, where are they going to look first? And by the way, if they didn't fit well into your company, aren't you glad you know that now, before you've signed a contract with them? So it's really a beautiful thing that they do. They're up in Ann Arbor, they're really doing that too. Some of the companies up there are really concentrating on those schools and finding them and mentoring them, and then they have the recruiting edge. Next, it increases participation and engagement of employees because they feel like they matter. And I know that I have stayed at an organization because of a mentor that I had. And I had other offers. But because they were believing in me, I started really caring about my work, caring about the mission of the organization. It all became, you know, just so much more healthy than just going and clock watching. It helps in the management of stress and change while promoting higher productivity. When you've got people in mentoring relationships, you've got a place for them to vent, for them to talk about changes and things that are going on, and it's just going to keep people at your organization. It's going to keep things positive. You can work with your mentoring pairs if you've got a more structured program and help, you know, give them things to talk about to work through a big change. You know, I was in an organization where they lost their president. We lost our president, and it was a big deal. And so to work through that change, we were in these, they gave us questions specifically to talk about in our mentoring relationships. It aligns the organization's goals with personal goals of the employees, which is great, okay? Because then you really have somebody that's very, very engaged. Because not only are they working on their personal stuff, but they're working towards organizational goals. It's a total win-win. And I know when I spoke at, it was a symposium up in Calgary. We were talking with the supply chain up there. And they interviewed the, you know, actually bigger room than this of people and asked them, you know, what are the 2 things that are most important to you as far as what makes you stay at an organization. And they said the first was personal development, that they felt like there was a path for them and a way that they could grow personally. That was number one. This is supply chain, very similar to oil and gas, propane, similar industries. And then number two was their organizational culture. Was it a place where they had good relationships and felt like those relationships were working? Because I will tell you, people leave people, not organizations. I mean, you think about that. How many of you have left a job recently or not too long ago? Think about the last time you left a job. Nobody? Seriously, you've all been in the same job since you were 2? Okay, so maybe you don't want to raise your hand, because I know there's a lot of family-owned businesses here, okay? But the last time you were frustrated in your job, let's put it that way, was it due to a personal relationship or something that was going on with another human being? Okay. There we go. Raises productivity through specific goal setting. Again, when we talk about formal programs or more structured programs, I'm a big fan of getting people in regular accountability, mentoring relationships so that you move on goals. I mean, it's nice if you get together and talk and it's casual and it's, you're learning things in a casual fashion, but when you start adding goals and accountability and feedback on those goals, you absolutely supercharge their development and your organization's productivity. It's crazy, I'm telling you. Okay, it reduces turnover and enhances satisfaction. And then it gives, oops, looks like the same thing. Sorry, I don't know what happened there. There we go. Enhances communication and reduces organizational silos. Okay, so think about if you're in an organization. I worked with a group called Compassion International, and they had all these divisions in their organization. And these divisions were really siloed. They didn't talk to each other. And so what they wanted to do was they did a structured mentoring program that worked across those silos. So they purposefully paired people from a division here to a division here, division here to division here. And what they found out was they had a tremendous amount of duplicate effort that they didn't know they had because nobody was talking to each other. They found out, there was one pair, they found out that in their 2 divisions, there was one person that was doing exactly the same thing. So what they ended up doing was giving that job, having the one person cover it for both divisions, and then all of a sudden they have another person who can be proactive in their marketing. It was in a marketing area. And can be thinking of the cutting edge stuff instead of just getting the job done. So they supercharged their organization's marketing area just by mentoring across divisional silos. Provides faster and more robust transfer of knowledge and skills. I would just rather learn from a person. Hand me a manual and I just want to punch my eye. It's not fun. Provides for better succession planning, okay? So if you're thinking about like the next person coming along, you want to be doing the success, making sure people are getting trained and mentored. Chipotle. How many of you guys have heard of Chipotle? How many of you have eaten at Chipotle? How many of you love Chipotle? I really love Chipotle. Anyway, okay, so what Chipotle did, in 2005, they had a new executive person in senior leadership come in. And at that time, they were hiring from outside of the company well over 50% of their executive leadership. And so this guy said, you know what, I don't want that anymore. I want people to come from within this organization instead. And so what he did was he established this mentoring program so that you cannot leave your job until you have trained someone else to do your job, not just okay, to do it with excellence. And so what's happened is these, the people involved there have become very, they're owning their work, they care about their work. If you go into a Chipotle, honestly, I do feel like when somebody's cleaning the counter, they're cleaning because they care that the counter's clean, not just because their supervisor told them to clean it. because they've got this feeling of that this stuff matters, and they're being mentored, and they're becoming more engaged. And right now, Chipotle is 98% internal hires for their executive leadership. That's huge. Since 2005, that's what mentoring did for them. Now think about what they're saving, and by the way, their chain is growing like this. So their productivity is speaking to it too. Okay, it provides better organizational brand identity, just when you're talking about that and you're having your mentoring pairs really talking about that, understanding organizational culture together, sharing vision together, sharing passion together, it'll help your brand identity. And it offers inclusion through more positive relationships in a diverse organizational culture. I trained at Anadarko Petroleum, and it was over in China, Beijing. And their whole thing was they had to get, because the Chinese group and the American group were just, it was not pretty. And I mean, it was such a cultural clash. And so they did a lot of things. They did some education on that. But if you look at the statistics on diversity training doesn't work. There's great studies. If you want to see them, ask me later. What they found is diversity training with mentoring does work. And the reason is, diversity training in and of itself, where you just talk about how somebody's different from you and that's it, isn't very helpful. But if you put those two people then together in a learning relationship, then all of a sudden they're starting to understand each other. They're starting to find out maybe they're not as different as they thought. They're finding touch points with each other. I teach at a leadership at a college back in Denver, and one of my assignments to them was, I want you to go out and just go listen to somebody that you don't get along with. I just want you to just go out and do this. Think of somebody that really has been irritating you, and I want you to go and just listen to them. And I gave them a few questions to ask that might elicit some commonalities. And so, of course, they're just dragging their feet and really cussing under their breath as they leave because they didn't want to do it. And I don't blame them. I probably wouldn't want to either. But anyway, so they go out and they do this. And they come in the next time, and they're all like buzzing and all excited to tell me what happened. And like one girl said that she had been... She and her neighbor had just been fighting over, well, it started with the trash can placement, which was a big deal, okay? And then it was the sprinkler. And she said they had just gotten to this point where they could not get along. And so she did this. She just went over and she just started listening to her. And of course, the lady's like, why do you want to do that? I mean, she goes, do you want to come over for coffee? And the lady's like, why do you want to do that? Well, because I just want to talk to you. I just want to what do you want to say to me? No, I just want to have a conversation. What do you want to say? I just want to talk to you. Well, by the end of the conversation, both of them realized they actually had some things in common. Another guy goes to his construction site, and this was not too long after 9/11, and there was a gentleman there that was Muslim. And nobody would eat with him. The poor guy was sitting at the lunch table by himself. And so, this guy said, I'm just going to go talk to him. So he sits down, he goes, I just want to, is it okay if I sit and eat lunch with you? And the guys go, what do you want? He's like, well, I just want to eat lunch with you. And he's like, why do you want to do that? He's like, because I just want to do it. And so he said it took longer, but he goes, I can't believe it. He goes, this Muslim guy, he actually loves his family. Wow, we have that in common. And you know what else? He actually wants to do a good job. Wow, okay. So you can see how with mentoring, when you have that relational face-to-face, those barriers, those irritations start to dissolve. And it really can benefit your organizations to do that. Okay. Just some quick statistics, and I tried to pick the best ones. These are in your handout, but there is so much research on mentoring. I mean, there's just no question that it's really good, okay? So the Emerging Workforces Study cites that 77% of companies that support mentoring saw an increase in retention and an increase in performance. These things hit your bottom line. These things are really important. Turnover reduced by 20%, with the mentoring programs in place. And 35% of employees who do not receive regular mentoring look for another job in 12 months. Think about how that's going to hit your bottom line. Okay, next, workforce management cites that 96% of surveyed businesses reported mentoring as an important developmental tool. In a study done by Manchester Incorporated, the ROI is typically 6 times the cost when coaching and mentoring is provided to those in management. So when you go, like if you go to this training, okay, you've been trained at a couple of workshops, if nothing is ever followed up on that, if you don't talk with anybody about it, it often goes into a binder somewhere and you don't ever deal with it again. It's not effective. But when you add mentoring to it, it's 6 times more effective. I mean, I don't know what it costs to come here, but if it could be 6 times more effective, add mentoring to it. Have somebody mentor you through some of the stuff you're learning. Okay, in a study done by managerial productivity increased by 88% when mentoring was involved versus only 24% with training alone. And 71% of Fortune 500 companies use mentoring to assure learning occurs in their organizations. They're finding that this is a valuable tool. And it's not that touchy-feely thing that I was so opposed to. It has really solid bottom line results for your organizations. I don't know why those are flipping up twice like that. So what is mentoring? Well, it's a brain to pick. You know, it's nice to have somebody to talk to, bounce ideas off of. Even if they aren't an expert, it's still good to have somebody to talk to about stuff who has a different opinion or a different perspective. And then it's an ear to listen. And that's what I talk about a lot, is listening is the first thing. So when we're talking about how are you going to work with the person you want to work with, we always start with listening. And you will be amazed. Like I said, with that group of kids that I sent out, that's what they learned. It shows respect as you're trying to not harass your person. Listen to them first. I know you aren't doing it. I'm just saying. And then a push in the right direction. Okay, so it's that little shove because somebody else cares about what you're doing. Somebody else is kind of tracking how you're doing. They care that you're doing well. More thorough definition. It's a reciprocal and collaborative learning relationship, so it is about learning, between 2 or more people who share mutual accountability for helping the mentee work towards integrated personal, spiritual, and professional development and work synergistically towards organizational goals. So basically, it's just helping the person be all that they can be. Any questions before we go into the 6 relationships? This is so exciting. You guys are all sitting there going, okay, here we go. Let's talk about the 6 mentoring relationships. Because you've probably heard different words kind of tossed around, like coach or mentor, or where does sponsoring fit in? How about my supervisor? What about them? So I'm going to encourage you that you want all 6 of these, and you want to be all 6 of these. Now, you'll have to prioritize, because obviously you can't do it all at once. But okay, so a formal mentor, or a structured mentoring relationship. And this is on the other side of your handout. Why is it good? Well, the relationship transcends. The person truly cares about you as a whole person. It's a longer-term relationship. You feel valued because you're actually meeting together on a regular basis. And I know that when I know someone is giving me their time like that, I really feel valued. I mean, I have to say, sometimes I would be like, I don't know why you do it, but thank you. You know, I mean, it means so much to me. And that they care, and that integrated thing is really important because they'll look at your personal life and your professional life and how they're working together and how your passion as a person and what your purpose is in life and how you're moving through things in your work and in your professional development. So it's just a good thing. Informal mentor, and this is something that everyone should be cultivating, multiple informal mentors. Figure out what you want to learn, and then go find somebody that does it well, and then ask them to mentor you. I actually have my counseling degree, and one of the things we learned in the counseling degree that was very much of a relief to me was that in counseling, life change happens in a counseling relationship. 40% of that life change is due to the counselee's readiness. Are they ready to make the change in their life? 40% is due to that counselee's motivation. You can't make somebody do something they don't want to do. That's 80%. That leaves only 20% up to me as the counselor, which I loved, because a lot of the pressure gets taken off of you. Same thing in mentoring. If you're motivated to learn, you will. You as mentors, when you're in the mentoring role, yes, you can encourage and do all those things, but if they're not motivated to make the changes, they're not going to do it. And so, your job as a mentor maybe is to inspire them, to respect them, to listen to them, help them see, some of the things that they can do and work on. But yeah, going up to them and saying, you're really bad at this and I'd like to mentor you on it, it's probably not going to come across really well. So how does it differ from a formal mentor? Well, it's voluntary, and it really is mentee-driven. As you look out and say, well, this is something I want to learn. I worked for an organization whose president was a phenomenal speaker. And I had never spoken in front of that big of a group except like maybe back in high school. And so, but my job was going to start being that. And so I was like petrified. And I said, you know what? I got to get me some skills. So I watched her and I observed how she was great at telling a story. And I thought, you know what? I want to get better at telling stories. And then the other thing she was really good at is she would start people in one place and move them to another place by the end of her talk. And it was a thing of beauty. And so I thought, these are the two things that I wanted to learn from her. So this is how I got her to be my mentor, is I went up to her, I just said, these are the things I really want to learn from you. I want to learn how to tell a good story. And I want to learn how to move people from one place to another. And she looked at me and she goes, okay, I can do that. She said, you have to realize a lot of people ask me to mentor them. But she said, when somebody comes, think about that, if somebody walks up to you and says, will you mentor me? It's like this big thing, and you don't know what it's entailing. But if instead you want to mentor and you go up to them and say something very specific, I've watched how you do a project management and you always get your stuff done on time. I would love to learn how to put timelines in place to do that well. Can you help me? That's a very different ask, and that's how you get these informal mentors. Because it tells them two things. It says, first of all, you've taken the time to observe them, and that you've seen things that you admire in them. We all like to have something that's admirable in us, and it feels good. And so then I will tell you, most of the time, people will say yes, unless they just don't have the time to do it. But if you can be really specific on your ask, they will often become your mentors. And she said, she committed to me for 6 months and helped me. Don't blame her for how I do up here. It's not her fault. Next is a coach. Now, the way a coach is different, okay, there are things called a life coach that are out there that are very much like a mentor because they take your whole life and coach you, okay? Taking that out of it, what the literature largely says is that a coach really comes in to help you with a certain skill. Often coaches are outside hires from outside of your organization because people in your organization may not have the skill that you need to be coached on. I worked in an organization where we had some issues with senior leadership, and trust was shattered in the organization, and especially in the leadership team. And so we had to bring in an outside trust coach to help us work through that issue. We couldn't do it on our own. But she came in with a very specific idea of what she was going to do, and she moved us from A to B. That's what a coach does. So you can be thinking about, what kind of skill do you want to learn? You may have to pay a coach. Often they are paid. But it's still a great way to learn something. Next, a supervisor. Okay, Your supervisor should be mentoring you. You as a supervisor should mentor the people you work with. But the thing is that the supervisors have to be concerned with the overall results of their team. And so they're not going to really care about how you're feeling one day when you're behind on a deadline. Okay? So what you need to do is you really should have, yes, supervisors should mentor. The great thing about supervisors is that they're there on a daily basis, and you get that regular touch with a supervisor. So definitely supervisors should be mentoring. But I encourage you to find mentors outside of your supervisory relationship to really get that learning and that acceptance of you as an individual where you're not having to worry about results. So to kind of show you the difference between mentor, coach, and supervisor, a mentor is biased in your favor. A coach is really more impartial. They're just trying to teach you a skill. And a supervisor is an evaluator of your work. Okay? Then you've got a mentor is more whole person focused. A coach is more job skill focused. And a supervisor is more results and productivity focused. Okay? A mentor is a sounding board. You can kind of pick and choose what you do, what advice you take. A coach is very directed. They really have certain things that they're going to tell you about how to learn a certain thing. And then a supervisor is, get the job done. So, since we're almost to question and answer, I'm just going to go ahead and finish these last two. Sponsor. A mentor can be a sponsor. A sponsor is just somebody who highlights your skills to other people and opens doors for you. I had a gal who was a great writer, and she was supposed to write an article for a really well-known magazine, and she allowed me to help her. I mean, I don't think I helped her that much, write this article, but then I got my name on the article. And my name never would have been in that magazine had she not sponsored me into that place. I had another situation when I worked for American Express a long time ago in sales, and I had just been promoted to a management position, and my mentor said, now that you're in management, I think that you need to learn how to run a good meeting. And back then, meetings were like, you go in for an hour, you take your notes, you check your phone. Actually, you weren't checking your phone back then, but you're kind of daydreaming, sort of get to the end of the meeting. Okay, it's time to be done. Go back to your cubicle. She goes, you've got to see this guy run meetings. And he was actually the CEO at the time. And so she goes, but I'll just warn you, stay in the back and don't say anything. I was like, okay. So she opened this door for me to see something that I never would have been allowed to see. And so we come in, and everybody's standing around this table. Standing. They didn't sit down. Interesting. They're all standing, and they've got like papers in their hands, like this. And I'm going, what is going on, And so then the CEO walks in, and he's like, all right, let's get going. He goes, what did you guys find out about this? Okay, that's good. What's our next step there? All right, can you take that? All right, you got it. Okay, what did we find out about this? Okay, what is everybody's opinion on this? Let's hear it from everybody. And everybody's just like this, and they're ready, and they're going. Meeting lasted maybe 20 minutes. Everybody left with something to do, and everybody left with a bunch of energy. It was crazy. But that guy, that's why, that company grew like wildfire. It just, because of that kind of a thing. But again, I would have never been allowed to be in those meetings had someone not sponsored me. Last is a leader. And this is how you can really be mentored by someone who doesn't even know they're mentoring you. Can you guys think of a time when you've watched somebody and learned something from them and they don't know that they've taught it to you? Leaders, and I will say everybody should be thinking about how they can do this. Leaders inspire. They help bring out that passion. They help you tie what you're doing on a day-to-day basis to the big vision of what your company is doing and why it matters. I know that when I worked in one of these companies, I was in charge of the call center. And I had just read about this, and so I got all inspired, okay? because I wouldn't have probably thought of it on my own. But I went down there into the call center, and I went down there and made sure that each person in that call center understood that they were our first touch on our customer. And without them, first of all, we wouldn't understand our customer because we weren't really talking with them like they were on a day-to-day basis. And also, it's our customers' impression of our company. I mean, think about it. If you get, and you have to sit there and wait too long, or you've got somebody that's kind of surly on the phone in customer service, aren't you just like ready to, But if you get someone on the phone and they're really helpful and they make a difference, that's a completely different thing. And so I wanted to make sure they knew that even though they were getting yelled at on an hourly basis, that what they did really, really mattered. Think about where you might be able to do that with the people around you. How can you encourage people to really see that what they do matters? I had another leader who came up to me. This was actually in a church, and I had been doing youth ministry. And it was the pastor, and he came up to me, and he put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, Liz, he goes, you know what? He goes, I really have noticed how fast the youth group is growing as you've been working with them. And he goes, and even my daughter has started coming again, which is huge because she doesn't usually do that. And he said I'm watching that when we get in meetings with staff, people don't listen to your opinion as much because I think they see you as a stay-at-home mom that doesn't work. And so he said, I really think what you should do is go back to school. He goes, I really think you should get your master's degree. And he goes, that would really lend you a lot of credibility, and you'd also learn a lot. And he said, I just think you're the kind of person that would really excel there. Okay, that took him 10 minutes, changed my life. He took that time to observe me, tell me what he saw that was good, posed an issue that was happening, and gave me a proposed solution. He didn't mentor me anymore. I mean, that was the bulk of what he did for me. But I went back to school because of him, because he encouraged me that way. I want to finish this section with just a story about a guy named Garvin and his manager, brand new manager that had come in named Jim. And Jim had come into the company from another place, and he basically had gotten a bunch of, they were data entry people and kind of IT people, a lot of people in cubicles, a lot of people not talking to each other. And so Jim decided to go around and get to know the people, find out what was going on with them, informally mentor them, lead them. He started talking to them about what they did and how important it was. And he remembered talking with a young guy named Garvin. And he said, when I first started talking with him, he seemed very quiet, closed off. Really, he said, I kind of got a really weird vibe off of him, a sad, sad vibe off of him. But he said, I just made sure that I went in and saw him on a regular basis and told him the things that I thought he was doing well and encouraged him and, spent some time with him. And he said after a few months, Garvin walked up to him and handed him a brand new gaming system. And Jim had been saying that he had wanted that gaming system as a joke to everybody. Hey, yeah, gee, I wish I could get the new, and I'm sorry, I don't game, so I don't know what the name of it was. But anyway, the new, help me out. Xbox, okay. So the new Xbox, and he would joke about that at team meetings and everything. Well, Garvin hands him a brand new gaming system. And Jim goes, whoa, wait a minute. He goes, I can't take this from you. He goes, that was just a joke. He goes, please, he was embarrassed. He thought maybe that he'd done something to make this guy feel guilty and bring him the gaming system. And Garvin said, no. He said, I really need you to take this. He said, you need to know something about me. He said, a few months back, I had been taking care of my mom who had been sick. And so I'd been living at home with her, and it really had taken up so much of my life. I really didn't have much of a social life at all. But taking care of her really gave me purpose. And it made me feel like I was making a difference every day. And then she passed away. And he said, I started realizing I was coming to work and I was sitting in my cubicle and I just started thinking I just really didn't matter much to anybody. He said, I started thinking, what if I didn't show up? How long would it take anybody to notice that I wasn't here? And he said, so I started toying with the thought of killing myself. And he said, I got on websites, and there are actually websites that do this, that teach you how to kill yourself. And so he got onto this one website, and it said, okay, if you want to kill yourself, what you want to do is go out, take out a whole month's salary, and you go buy a gun, a beautiful gun. And you buy a beautiful box to put that gun in. And then it said, and then every night you're going to take that box out from under your bed, and you're going to look at the box and touch the box. And then you're slowly but surely, you'll start lifting the lid, and you're going to look at the gun in the box. And then, after a while, you're going to take that gun out of the box, and you're going to hold it, and you're going to touch it and feel the barrel, and you're going to feel the handle, and you're going to look at that gun. And then, as you keep going through step after step, and then the final stage is that you start doing what they call teething, and you put it in your mouth right against your teeth. Get used to the feel of what that's like till you're not scared anymore. And then eventually, you'll be able to pull the trigger. He said, I was to the point of teething when you started coming into my cubicle on a regular basis. And he said, what you did was, first of all, you listened to me. You made me feel like somebody actually noticed whether I was here or not. But he said, you didn't stop there. He said, you started commenting to me on my sense of humor. He goes, nobody really ever paid attention to my sense of humor. But he said, you would genuinely laugh at some of the stuff I said. And he goes, so I would actually start thinking about, hey, I'm going to try to think of more funny things to tell Jim because he appreciates me, and this is funny. And so he said, I took more time to do that and less time handling my gun. And he said, and then you started sponsoring me or showing my gifts and skills off to other people. You tell other people about my sense of humor. You also told other people about how I didn't miss a deadline. You started highlighting the good I was doing in this company. And he said, I started noticing that I was getting highs when I walked in to the building. And occasionally people would actually come by my cubicle and see if I wanted to go to lunch with them. And he said, and then finally, I was starting to get feedback on my emails, and people were emailing me back and commenting. I always tried to have a joke at the bottom of my email, a little riddle or something, and people loved that. And he said, I finally realized that maybe I did matter, that if I didn't show up to work, someone would care, and that I was making people's lives better by being timely on my timelines and making them laugh. And he said, so I sold my gun in the box, and I bought this Xbox for you. So, I just want you to think about, where can you mentor? Where can you find mentors? How can you establish more structure to mentoring in your organizations where it will have an absolute effect on your productivity and on your bottom line? Absolutely it will. And it'll be a much more pleasant place to go to work. When people are getting along with each other, you start having those mentoring networks going on, people start taking on a learning stance instead of being irritated. If you can sit there and instead of when somebody does something that's kind of off and you think it's weird, instead of being irritated and going, why did they do that? If you can say, why do they do that? Totally different environment where we're trying to learn from each other and understand each other. So, that is my encouragement to you. Think about where you can up the ante. If you don't have a mentor, find an informal one. Find a couple informal ones. If you have informal ones, turn them into formal ones. Make sure that you as a supervisor are encouraging and mentoring your employees. And make sure that you're encouraging your supervisor to mentor you. And then sponsorship options. Where can you highlight someone else's skills to other people? I mean, think about Jim. It was a very simple thing that he did, but it changed a life. Where can you be a leader and inspire passion in people to where they can really care about coming to work every day? Think about it. Okay, I think we have time for questions. Yay! All right, questions on all of this. And I probably didn't answer your question yet, so ask it again.
Kind of is,
Okay.
the question was, how can you mentor somebody without them knowing they're being mentored?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's in listening, respecting them, taking on a learning stance. My best mentors were not the people who told me what to do or gave me advice. They were people who elicited my thought process. You know, who asked me really good questions about, and just helped me process things through. And you can do that. People, that is hardcore awesome mentoring. If you can get people processing through and thinking through the difficult questions and thinking through how to improve certain things, that's a really good way to do it too. And, you know, finding their strengths, observing them and saying, hey, you know, when you do this, it has this great effect. And then on occasion say, hey, you know what? I know you care so much about your job and you really want to do a good job here. And I'm noticing that when you do this, it's making you less effective. And I just really care about you enough that I got to tell you that, because I really see such a great future for you. And so if you could work on this one thing, I think you'll be a lot more successful here. Does that answer your question now? Sort of? Ish? Okay. Other questions?
We had a conversation lately about reverse mentoring, and I don't know if what that means exactly, but I think it was talking about generational and how it can go both ways.
Yes, reverse mentoring is where someone, and it's often younger or less experienced, mentors somebody older or more experienced because they still have something to offer. So, like you might, I was reverse mentored by a girl who helped me with technology. I'm just ridiculously horrible with technology. And, you know, and honestly, she was like, oh, I can't mentor you. You know all the stuff about mentoring, which I don't necessarily. But, I mean, you know, I can't. I said, no, I don't. She's the one that showed me how to text. I wouldn't even be talking to my kids these days if I didn't know how to text. And so she literally took my fingers on the phone and showed me how to do it. So that's what reverse mentoring is. And I think there's a generational piece, and I don't know how many of you are experiencing that crunch between the baby boomers and the millennials. And you've got the baby boomers, and the millennials think they're old and set in their ways and rude and crabby, and the baby boomers think the millennials are entitled and irresponsible and all of this. And it just becomes this big clash of generations that's very frustrating for people. And again, I just encourage this cross-generational kind of mentoring thing. When you get people in relationships like that, all of a sudden they start seeing their similarities. You know, I joke on my radio show that nobody goes to work wanting to do a bad job and hoping people will hate them. I mean, pretty much nobody does that, okay? So, you know, if you can even just find those commonalities and say, hey, we both want to do a good job here, and we both want to get along with people. You know, even if you have to start at that most rudimentary place, getting people of different generations, you'll find that you come up with new solutions that you may not have ever thought of. I will tell you that the millennial generation, whenever I have them in a class or something, they come up with stuff that's just way out there and really smart. And so, but if I just got irritated with them and thought that they were just spoiled and entitled, I would never have that opportunity to have those creative ideas. So, Other questions?
Hi, Jill. Okay, I was trying to figure out how to say it, but you were talking about the 40% people are ready to make a change or ready. What if you have, how much time, or let's see, if you have a situation and you see a great opportunity for a mentorship between two employees, but the potential mentor you feel is not ready or doesn't have the communication skills to be an effective mentor, do you just, is there any hope there? I mean,
Just, yeah,
Toss it?
throw in the towel. No. This is a thing, and I talk about 5 skills. I've actually trained in mentoring on like 6 continents, I kid you not. And there are 5 skills that I've found transfer, and if you do those 5 things, and there's 5 things that everybody can do, they can be a good mentor. And the 5 skills are listening. Number 1, that transcends every culture, every generation, every gender. If you listen to each other, it's a very important first step. Second step is building trust. And again, that may look different in different cultures and different organizations, but you do need to build that trust because growth can't occur without it. Third thing is setting effective goals, and I use the acronym SMART. I don't know how many of you are familiar with SMART goals, but it's a good way to write goals. And again, very easy to learn how to write a SMART goal. Then giving both positive and, I say, corrective feedback. I don't use criticism. I don't use negative feedback because it's not about that. It should come from a place of wanting somebody to be more effective. Excuse me. Okay, so giving feedback, that's 4. And then the 5th is inspiring. That if you can just inspire each other, which is really about believing in each other. And all 5 of these skills go both ways. So whenever I'm doing a mentoring program somewhere, and people come up and they're like, oh, we're not getting along with our mentor, or, this isn't working out, I say, okay, are you doing the 5 skills? And I promise you they're not. They go back, they fix it, and it's okay. So I know it sounds like, oh gosh, is it really that simple? It actually is that simple. And, of course, underneath it all is just a genuine respect for the other person. You don't have to like them. They don't have to be your best friend. But you do have to respect them as a human being. And if that comes across, if you don't respect them, the relationships aren't going to work. That's a good question. Any other questions? I'm really impressed. You guys stayed awake and everything. I'm so happy.
How about, I think some people are reluctant to be a mentor because they fear they're not going to be valued in that company as much if someone else knows what they know. So how do you...
That's a really good question. And I will tell you there's a generational piece to that because baby boomers see information as power. But the Xers and the millennials, they can get anything they want with, So information isn't power anymore. And it's really hard to get past that and understand that that's not the case. So I guess what I would say is educating on that fact that it's not going to make them less valued. Research shows the people, and they even call it servant leadership, or people who are always coming alongside and helping other people, actually are thought of better than somebody who just is a smarty pants and thinks that their brains are all that matters. And so, these are hard things to break, especially with the baby boomer generation. And just so you know, I'm in between boomer and X, like right on the line. So I'm speaking of myself at the time. But we do get set in our ways. And we do think information is power, and it's not anymore, What's powerful is empowerment. What's powerful are engaged employees. What's powerful is building into the life of another person so you have a permanent legacy in them. Those are the things that are really powerful. And I think people are starting to get that. But like I said, that's a generational thing. Any other questions? Maybe one more and then we'll go. Yeah.
Yeah, you had started out, and I heard you mention when someone might approach you to become their mentor, and you say, you know, the person replies something to the effect, I'm busy, but I'll give you 6 months. Could you tell me how you feel about, because that makes sense, put a time limit on it. Do you think that's important to do so the person being asked isn't obligated too long? And
Yes.
they know when it's going to stop? How do you feel?
Oh, love that you asked that question because it is important to have an end date. Now, that doesn't mean you can't re-up and extend it, but I actually tell people you should have a mentor for about a year and then get another mentor because it doesn't mean you have to stop talking to that person, but you're going to do better if you continually have new perspectives into your life and new input into your life. And so I think having an end date is incredibly important. One of the other reasons it's really important is then at the end date, you sit, and I tell people, evaluate and celebrate. So when your relationship is over, think about what you did that was great. What did you guys learn? What did you accomplish? Celebrate those things. Evaluate how they went. Evaluate if stuff didn't go well or you had some challenges, so for your next mentoring relationship, you can correct some of those things. But if you do that, then both of you feel like your time was well spent. What happens a lot of times with mentoring groups is they kind of have this goal and they work on it, and really they've kind of done the work that they can do on it, but neither of them wants to say goodbye because they haven't set a date, and so then it kind of fizzles, and then slowly but surely somebody's going to get their feelings hurt because somebody's not really having the time for them anymore, and it just kind of does this, and then the impression of what was actually a very good, successful mentoring relationship is negative, and it shouldn't be. So definitely have an end date. You know, again, you can re-up, you can redo it, that's fine. Now, informal mentoring, if it's just for a skill or whatever, that's a little different. But even on informal mentoring, I would say, it's nice to say, especially if you're asking for somebody to really spend some regular time with you, to give them an end date. I find, again, everybody always says, it's so hard to get mentors, it's so hard to get mentors. If you give people exactly what they're going to be doing, exactly what skills they're looking for, give them the 5 skills, because I believe in them, and then give them an end date. You're much more likely to find mentors to help your organization. Okay, I think we're done. Yes?
My notes actually say applause, applause, so thank you for going along. Thank you, Dr. Selzer, for giving us lots of answers to the question, why mentoring? The questions on the future Women in Propane Council agenda are who, when, where, how. And as we look forward to putting together our formal mentoring program that will be nationwide and industry-wide, and include, FYI, men and women, because we can learn so much from each other in the conversation, I urge you to join the council as we answer those questions for the industry. As a member of Women in Propane, your voice will be heard in the formation of the answers. Now, we want to further explore the value of social learning. At Drinks, the bar across from Sterling's restaurant in the Silver Legacy, the Women in Propane Council has reserved a number of tables there and would love to have you join us for a no-host networking conversation. Thank you again to Dr. Selzer. Thank you to all of you for being here.